they were going to be making £11 million. They were sold for £30,000.
VCs want returns. And actually, they would prefer that you crashed and burned trying.
Youngest, first
34.
Muslim, first South Asian.
They were like, you're not allowed to use this in a movie. So the movie had to scrap the last third. Yo, everyone, welcome back. Brand new Techish in the building. It is me, Michael Bahane, and I'm back this week with
Abadesi of Hustle Crew. Woo!
Yep, Abadesi in the house. All right, cool. First things first, we got to jump into this Plantmade story. I know everyone is eager for us to talk about it. If you are from the US, Plantmade was an amazing hair and kind of like beauty brand started by this unreal entrepreneur based out of the UK called Emma. She started it basically with like £100, which is like $120, scaled it up with 5 years, and basically was doing $5 million in sale, or maybe close to $6 million in sale, I think, from what I've heard. But unfortunately, there was a recent announcement on her Instagram saying that she's no longer involved in the company. Her and the entire management team, which is a family-run business, is no longer involved. There seems to be a back and forth with the new owners. But essentially, she's lost control of the firm that she started and executed so brilliantly. People have done some investigations, there's been a few articles, and it looks like it was a mix of debt that they owe to HMRC, a mix of debt they owe to kind of fintech providers who probably were giving them liquidity and credit. And then that led to the company going into administration, which they were then bought out of by new owners who then agreed to kind of keep them on board, but then they fell out. But the reason why I think this story is fascinating is because there has been, I wouldn't say an epidemic, but let's say there's been a few notable examples of Black-run companies that are quite popular within the community, doing well, particularly Black women-run companies. For example, Afrocentrics, I think I've got that right. Afrocentrics is how you say it, right? Founded by Rachel and Jocelyn. And there was Grassfield, which is a fashion brand that got taken over by investors as well. What are the kind of common threads, I guess, that we can talk about? Because I think what's helpful is not just to go over and be chatty-patty about someone's company going out of business. Lots of people go out of business. What they've all done is amazing and it can happen to anybody. But kind of like, I want to give lessons to founders, Black founders particularly, like how do you kind of avoid your baby basically being taken out of your control, through multiple factors, right? And I think let's be helpful in that sense.
I mean, for what I've observed, all of those companies that you've just named, there are different reasons why the CEO is no longer involved. And I think that's like worth calling out. Like, yes, they have Black women at the helm. But, if you think about Plantmade, this is a company where Amma, the founder, was in the Sunday Times. She was featured regularly on all of the top lists. At one point, it was reported that they were going to be making £11 million in revenue. In the end, they were sold for £30,000, right, to a holding company because they were in administration in arrears of nearly £500,000 owed to the tax service and HMRC and so many other things. So, that announcement was understandably super emotive, the one that Amma put there, like, we didn't expect to no longer be in charge of the company. This is really sad. I'm sure she'll move on to do amazing, great things. Like, she's got that entrepreneurship drive. But, to end up in a situation where you owe that much in back taxes and stuff like that, like, I can't personally imagine being in that situation like myself. So I think there's probably like something around the growing pains of growth, sometimes we fly too close to the sun and we bite off more than we can chew. And I think that's definitely something that happened there. I mean, with Afrocentrics, that was more of a situation of getting in bed with investors who actually are not aligned with you. So actually identifying a growth partner only to then, be managed out. There was a great exclusive in Black Ballad that Rachel, the founder of Afrocentrics, wrote about, going on mat leave, having all of these family challenges and investors basically losing their patience and being like, game over. So I don't know. What do you think are kind of like the learnings? Because obviously no one wants to lose their baby, right? No one wants to lose that chance. But what do you think?
I think what it is that when you're coming from communities that don't have access to capital, when you try to scale, you either do imperfect things like debt, or you get investors that you don't know much about and they screw you over, basically. Imagine being a very privileged, white guy founder based in the US. You've got friends and family around 500K probably. You could probably raise that, with your uncle, your auntie, this person, that person, the person that you worked with. So those people, they're less likely to screw you over. To get 300, 500K or £1 million in capital as a Black woman founder, as a Black founder, you're going outside your network, people who don't necessarily have your best interests at heart, who also probably don't trust you because of who you are. Let's keep it real, right? They think you've done well, you've scaled up, well done, you've got this part, but we're going to take it over. Or we're going to say, we know how to handle it. You don't know what you're doing. You are not an operator. We're the operators, basically. So I think one thing, obviously we've said this so many times, if you can bootstrap, obviously that's not always possible. Number two, build it before you need it. Build your investor networks before you need it. Get out there early. Who do you know, friend of
Facts.
a friend of a friend, who's got capital, who's somebody who's trusted, who's invested in similar founders to you or in a similar space that has credentials and has a reference that you can tap into, say, okay, this person's good. This person screwed over the other founders. I'm gonna avoid them, for example, right?
Mm,
The other thing is that it's just inherently difficult. There is no shame in failing in this sort of stuff. Like most companies
absolutely.
fail, most companies don't work. So bouncing back and starting another company is, something that in the US obviously is very common. Over here, we tend to view failure
$100%.
a lot more like, yeah, especially listen, even coming from the black community can often be just like, oh yeah, go back to your 9 to 5. You tried it, you know how it is. Like go back to security, go back to safety, particularly immigrant communities. There's a very much like an emphasis on safety. But obviously, come back again, you know what I mean, and do your thing again. Like there's no shame in that game whatsoever. You've got a lot more experience now. You know how it works. You know the lessons that you've learned. But yeah, so I think the other thing, last but not least,
Yeah.
and I'm not the person who can speak on this best, but there is something to how, for example, Mark Zuckerberg, I know this is a terrible example because he's so far removed from what we're
Your
talking about in
favorite
terms of the
person.
scale, but these founders know how to get safeguards in terms of when they're bringing in investors, they make sure that they've got
Mm,
super voting shares. They make sure that there's certain agreements that preserve founder control.
yeah,
And because we probably don't have that leverage, we're not able to probably implement that. But sometimes also it could be a lack of knowledge. So look, if you
100%.
are a young founder, look into basically how have some of these top Silicon Valley based companies maintain founder control. And it's not just because people just trust the founder. It's because in the early stages, in the paperwork, it was, yo, the founder has super voting shares basically. And this
Mm,
actually stemmed from what happened to Steve Jobs, who was pushed out of Apple. So
yeah.
Steve Jobs was famously pushed out of Apple. So a lot of young founders, basically, especially like Y Combinator, start teaching their founders, we can't let that happen to you again. We're going to be in your
Mm,
corner. We'll get your paperwork right. So I don't have the actual, this is exactly what you do. But if you are a young founder listening to this, don't be
get
afraid to look into
advice.
that. But yeah, get that advice
Get a
basically.
good lawyer,
Because,
honestly.
yeah,
Get a
100%.
good lawyer. Yeah, I think you're right.
But yeah, I think circling back to like Plantmade, just obviously to say like they did amazing. The company is still carrying on under new management, and I think it is still Black British owned, and the
Mm,
employees still have maintained their kind of work. So obviously, don't say, "Oh, that's it. We're not supporting the company anymore." Whatever, whatever. Like
yeah.
this is still kind of a great brand that is still pushing the culture forward. And yeah, I think Emma will bounce back and do something
I
amazing as
kinda
well. So
wanna
we look forward
see
to our next moves.
Yeah, I kinda wanna see, like, a more deep dive, like a postmortem. I think it'd be really interesting. Like, I remember when Made.com, the furniture retailer that I think at one point was, like, doing a third of $1 billion a year revenue. I mean, it was actually crazy, and you'd see their
Yeah, I
adverts
remember.
all over the tube, and people were like, "Oh, they're gonna be a unicorn," like, blah, 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 and then boom, they went into administration. And what was so interesting was actually, like, when the CEO started speaking to press after things were all wrapped up and actually explained the story of how, due to an rapid increase of sales over COVID, they actually expanded their physical spaces within the
Mm,
UK and then underestimated not only like the additional cost of that in line with sales then dropping post COVID, but also
right,
complexities around global supply chain, tariffs, and stuff like that. So it was just like this compounding of different, I guess, like unpredictable stressors on costs that then meant that like this business that literally was printing money was suddenly broke.
right.
And, like you said, we don't always have the right support networks. We don't always have the right advice. I think sometimes we can also like have it all and still just not predict the way the market's going to go.
Yes, I think one last thing I'll say, I'll speak from my regular gospel. Be very mindful about what kind of company also you want to build. Many people who
Mm,
actually would be content with a bootstrap profitable business go down raising money route because they believe that's what you do. And they also believe that's
mm.
how you become credible. I had a conversation with a young founder and he was just talking about how, he longed for the article, the TechCrunch article of like, yeah, XY company, we raised 5 million. And I'm like, well, that itself is not success because once you're on that rocket ship, you can't get off.
Oh,
Your
yeah.
VCs want returns. And actually, they would prefer that you crashed and burned trying than you saying, oh, let's go security first. Let's just put this capital away and be not too aggressive. No, for the VC to get their return, they need you to go to the $1 billion exit.
For
And if
sure.
you're not going to get to that $1 billion exit, they'd rather you crash and burn.
Mm,
So if that's not what you're trying to do, just design the company that you want to build very, very carefully, methodically. You could do this bootstrap. You could go back to a 9 to 5 and just get capital that way and do it slowly, right? So yeah, just be mindful of what kind of company you're trying to create because yeah, don't go
facts.
down a path that you don't necessarily know what you're doing and you assume that you have to do that, but you don't.
One person who talks about this a lot, I was just going to piggyback on that, is Tim Armu. And he always talks about, the founder of Fanbytes, which had a
Yeah.
7-figure exit. And he always talks about making your own definition of success, not even as a founder, just as like a career person. Like it's so important that as you wake up and you show up for your life, You create your own definition of success in terms of what makes you feel fulfilled, what makes you feel validated. And it shouldn't be some external thing like, oh, I'm on Forbes 30 under 30. I have this TechCrunch article. I have that. That's not within your control. Success is the thing within your control, that you launched it by this day, that you grew it to this number of users, that you hit that number in revenue. So yeah, I think that's such an important reminder for all of us.
Yes, I think the next story also ties into, what's it like being a startup founder. So clearly, founded by Roy Lee,
Your
the kind of
fave.
super viral app has now pivoted to an AI note taker. So just to give the context,
Stop.
so it's just to give the context, Cluely was founded by obviously Roy Lee. I mentioned initially the initial kind of seed of the idea was that he built an AI app that would allow him to cheat on a coding interview. He managed to get a job at Amazon. They soon found out that he used this tool and they rescinded his offer. He was also expelled from his college and university.
Hmm.
But then he went out and raised $15 million from Andreessen Horowitz to basically build upon that kind of hype and build a quote unquote legitimate startup. What I didn't realize actually is that he made $1 million from the initial kind of interview coding cheat app because it was so viral. He monetized. He was already a millionaire
Indie
basically.
hacker.
Yeah, basically. So he could have carried on that route, but obviously he decided to raise this money from Andreessen. So Cluely now has pivoted several times. They initially were going to be like a cheat on everything using when you're on a sales call. So imagine like being able to get information about your
Nice.
sales lead on the call, whatever, right? But now
Yeah,
they've
yeah.
just pivoted to a straight up note taker app, which is a very competitive
Alter
space.
AI, watch out.
Yeah, but listen, it's a very competitive space. There's Granola, which I use. Notion has an
Oh,
inbuilt one, so Notion has bedded that into their existing
yeah.
features. So yeah, like I think he
You
also
use
said here
AI
that
note takers. I think they all
yeah,
suck.
we're gonna get into that
We'll
in a
come
second.
back
Hold
to
on.
this.
So he once claimed the ARR was 3 million and then it went to 7 million in a week. But now he's not open to sharing numbers basically because he said
Oh,
there's no
is he
upside
not?
to revealing numbers. Yeah, because obviously, listen, there's a lot of hype, right? And they're very good at rage bait marketing. That's the other thing I didn't mention. They're obviously very good at using viral tweets, viral TikToks, whatever, to grow. And that
Mm.
means people will try your products, but they're not necessarily going to stick around once they've tried it. And they're like,
Yeah.
do you know what? So
Lifetime value,
I'm
that's what you want.
lifetime value. So what's your thoughts on this? Like, I said to you jokingly that listen, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself becoming an AI note taker app, and it kind of feels that way. What's your
Oh
thoughts on the
god.
crowded AI tools market and Roy Lee now striking a more humble tone?
Are AI note takers the new crypto wallets? I just remember when I used to moderate the product hunt homepage like in 2019 and it'd be like, and another crypto wallet and another crypto wallet. And I was like, stop making crypto wallets. And I'm just going to be honest, right? I feel like because of how large language models are trained to like parse through data and like rationalize it and summarize it, I find a lot of AI note takers really redundant and actually kind of
Mm,
annoying in terms of how they
mm,
zoom out from the conversation. It's like I'll have a conversation, and what I think is really meaningful to highlight and capture from that conversation is not in the AI summary that I'm now getting from Google Gemini or like whatever. Instead, it's like, this was a conversation about the objectives, and the objectives were the key things to consider, and the key considerations were the highlights, and the highlights were the main points. And I'm like, what? There's no sense in this summary. It's like speaking
mm.
around instead of getting to the meat and bones. So yeah, I guess the first thing I want to say is that I'm not a fan in general of
Not
this
a fan.
product.
Yeah.
And two, too many, way too many. How many do we need? What's the differentiator? I don't even think the innovation within large language models and Gen AI is moving fast enough for anyone to really come out with anything that's quite differentiating as an AI note taker, unless you're turning my summary into like a string of emoji characters for like shits and giggles or whatever. But yeah, I think perhaps like the limit of their creativity has been exposed, right? Because if we think of when we first met this, young upstart Roy, I love that story. I love that story of like, oh, you want to kick me out of university? Fine, watch me build my own company. And I was like, because I was saying I'd hire him. I'd be like, someone
Yeah.
who's that innovative and that bold and who makes something that no one can detect, hire him. Like the way people get bounty hunters to find bugs. But I guess he's sort of reached the limit of his creativity. For me, this feels just like a very obvious pivot. And I feel like there are so many other more interesting problems to solve. What do you think? You're like his biggest fan. How are you feeling now?
I wouldn't say I was his biggest fan. I
Yeah,
respected
you
the
are a big
hustle.
fan.
No, no, no. I respected the hustle, but I do think, fundamentals matter. There's something probably not good about being so noisy before you've had product market fit because there's only so much times you
Mm.
can kind of like recapture that attention for the first time. So, making all this splash and then like actually you realize that what you're working on doesn't really connect with users. And then now you're doing a fifth pivot. It's like, would you have been
Mm,
better off just building behind the scenes with like 1,000 users quietly and just testing the product, kind of lean startup like, and then eventually,
mhm,
okay, we found something that works. Now we go hard. Now we go viral. Now we think.
yeah,
But I think the attention is intoxicating. I think you've been given $15 million, you're young, and it's like, actually, why don't we just have some fun, have a blast? It felt like a lot of the marketing they were doing was just a bunch of people, young people saying, let's have some fun with it.
true.
But I hate to sound like the unk, but like feels like they need a grown up in the room. They need a
Mm,
grown up in the room to tell them, like, yo, like, shouldn't we really be just like speaking to our customers instead of being on
mm,
TikTok right now? And then
mm.
eventually, once we've got it figured out, TikTok is not going anywhere. We'll be there, right? But at the same time, listen, the fact that we're talking about them, and they're not just one umpteenth note taker app that we're not talking about, maybe there's some magic to it. So but on the general note taker thingy, I found it useful. I'll be honest with you. Like, and this is
Did you play
when
around
you
with it? I'm on their website now. It looks like it's I mean, they do give you answers in real time, so it's kind of building on that hack your
initial concept.
interview, hack your sales call concept. It is yeah, I mean, they're definitely, like, positioning it now from the homepage as a recruitment tool, like, if you're on the
Right.
interview, job hunting. Yeah.
But in general, note taker apps, I found it helpful. There was one that we used, I think it was Otter, at my company for a little while. And a funny story, actually. So there was one time when like I was talking to my team and like they were giving me a very optimistic view of like one of the clients and like what the clients thought and the client's chance of resubscribing to us next year. And I was like, okay, that sounds a bit contradictory though. I've heard different things on email. The email seems a bit more tense than the actual call that you mentioned. When on the Otter AI, obviously I've got access to it and I listened back to the meeting and I listened to the notes and I was like, yeah, this wasn't optimistic. So they were not looking to resub whatsoever. Like I was like, I don't know if you guys couldn't read between the lines, but once I heard the actual audio and I read the transcription, I was like, yeah, this ain't working. So like maybe that's toxic boss moment in it, but it kind of works because I was like, yeah, okay, like and if this wasn't there, and I was just relying on like what people assess the situation based on just their recollection, I would have had a different picture of what's going on.
Like, their
So
confirmation bias exposed. They're like,
a
"Oh, this
hundred
person's
percent, yeah,
definitely gonna come through," and then it's like,
yeah,
no.
100%. Like so, but that's my kind of toxic boss moment where I'm spying on my employees, basically. Like, but yeah, it is what it is. You ever Google yourself and think, wait, why does the internet know where I live? That's data brokers for you. These companies legally collect and sell your personal info, your name, address, phone number, even your relatives' names, and anyone with a credit card can buy it. That's why I use Delete Me. It's a hands-free service that finds your personal data across hundreds of data brokers and people search sites and gets it down. And here's why I rate them. 1, they've been doing this for over 15 years, and they're the leading experts in personal data removal. 2, they actually verify your data before submitting removal, so you're not exposing yourself even more. And 3, you can talk to real privacy advisors when you need help, not some faceless bot. And it's not just for individuals, it's perfect for businesses as well. If your employees' data is floating around online, that's a serious security risk. Delete Me helps reduce that exposure before it becomes a problem. So yeah, if you care about privacy at home and at work, it's a no-brainer. Get 20% off at joindeleteme.com/techish with the promo code techish. That's TECHISH. That's joindeleteme.com/techish, code techish. Protect your people, protect your data. The link is in the show notes. So I think the next story I want to talk about is the Michael Jackson trailer that just dropped. We're going to swing back into culture now for a second. So the movie is
Your
called
namesake.
Michael. Yeah, the movie is called Michael and it's coming out, I think, in April next year. Trailer
Mm.
just dropped. Obviously, everyone's just gassed because it's got his nephew playing him and it looks a lot
No,
like him.
really?
Yeah, it's his nephew actual playing him. And people are saying this might be the biggest musical biopic of all time. Might beat Bohemian Rhapsody and hit 1 billion. Obviously, the fan base is there. Fascinating thing actually is I looked onto the Spotify charts, the top streaming artist of all time, not all time, currently. Michael Jackson is 22. The number one
Wow.
artist is like The Weeknd and Bruno Mars at like 122 million. He has like 60 million streams, and the guy's been dead for like 15 years. And his peak was probably like
Wow.
40 years ago. There's no other dead artist anywhere near him. He's above like Beyonce, Chris Brown, Future, all these living artists who are putting out
Mm,
work to this day. And Michael Jackson is number 22. And when this
yeah.
movie comes out, it probably will go number one. So the undeniable power of his catalog and obviously
Mm,
how his estate has managed it is obviously unreal.
yeah.
The controversy now is that this movie was meant to be a lot longer. The movie essentially was shot to include the allegations against him. It was going to go over the Geordie Chandler case, which I believe happened in 1983. But what happened is the lawyers of the family, Geordie Chandler, said actually in our NDA, in our kind of agreement that we did, where I think Michael Jackson settled for $20 million, it said that you're not allowed to depict this in a movie. Basically, they had the
Wow,
foresight to
smart.
realize that one day, yeah, there will be a Michael Jackson biopic. So they were like, you're not allowed to use this in a movie. So the movie had to scrap the last third. And now they're just releasing the movie up until kind of Thriller Bad. The movie goes from his kid childhood to like his peak and then it kind of stops off. And then they've got enough footage to make a sequel, but they may have to do reshoots to kind of make that into a whole
Mm.
movie. So yeah, I just found that fascinating. Do you think this movie
Wow.
will connect with audiences? Do you think this will be a $1 billion, smash hit, or do you think maybe people are tired of musical biopics?
I
Or
think it'll do well. I think it will
yeah,
do well. I mean, the musical's still going, right? And people love that. He has global appeal. I feel like we've spoken about it on the show before in terms of like how music is distributed. Because with streaming platforms, there's so much more music and it's so personalized and localized. We're all kind of living in our own music worlds.
yeah,
Whereas in the like 80s and 90s, you just all listen to the radio and
mhm,
all the radio all over the world were kind of playing the same tracks. And Michael Jackson could be maybe like that last mega superstar who's got that lasting global appeal. I mean, you go to Russia, you'll hear him. You go to, I don't know, the Middle East,
yeah,
Africa, the
wherever
far
global,
corners of the Arctic, Michael's there. Any karaoke night, someone's going to pick a Michael Jackson song. So there's some real lasting, multi generational, multi regional power in his stardom and in his voice. Everyone can remember where they were the day he died, if you are old enough to,
mm,
be around. So I think it's going to do really well. I think it's going to do really well. But I understand people have conflicted views about him, but I feel that at the same time, legacy is so interesting because there are people who will know of Michael Jackson now, but might not know the wider context. Like there could be kids that know his
right,
songs, but don't
yeah,
know the allegations, right?
right, yeah,
And that might just be like a new generation of listeners.
yeah. I mean, obviously, for context, listen, he was never found guilty of anything, and that's obviously something that has to be mentioned. The most times, I think the one time I got cooked the most doing this podcast was when I basically was like, I think, I think I watched the Leaving Neverland documentary, and I was like, it was pretty convincing, and people started like harassing me. Like Michael Jackson fans don't play around, and I actually am a Michael Jackson fan as well, so I know that hive
You're
they
named
don't
after
play in
him.
it. Yeah, I mean, let's not go into the deep past now. No, I'm joking. His name was an inspiration, I think, but there's a lot of Michaels from that time period, straight up,
There
just because of
are.
him, right? But the other point to make is the whole macro famous thing. I think there are individuals, similarly in Hollywood as well, who are the last of a dying breed, people that are universally famous across all
Yeah.
cohorts and all generations. And past a certain era, like those people just don't really exist anymore. Like
Mm.
my mum could tell you about Tom Cruise, my mum can tell you about Julia Roberts, she can tell you about maybe even The Rock to this day, Will Smith, obviously Michael Jackson. But I don't think like going forward that all generations will know Zendaya or Jacob Elordi or Tom Holland.
Mm.
For these people, like they don't have that universal fame because, like you said, we're all locked into our own personal algorithms. We're not
Yeah.
watching MTV or Top of the Pops.
Mm.
So I don't think anybody can be as famous as Michael Jackson because it's not
Can I
possible anymore.
can
Technologically,
I
we've gone left now.
I would also add like potentially like an international relations and like soft power thesis to that. I
Hmm.
think America's power as a cultural player has also diminished significantly in the last
That's
30
true.
years. And I think that's also part of, that explanation that you're giving us and that trend that you're giving us. There was a time where if you thought of pop culture, you thought of America, whether it was the action blockbusters, whether it was the pop stars, whether it was the movies, the MTV music videos, la la la. If you look at what's trending now, what's been like in the top 10 of Netflix, K-pop Demon Hunters, right? If you
Yeah.
look at
Squid
what's
Games.
trending, exactly, the zeitgeist is shifting eastwards and also
Hmm.
southwards, depending on where you are in the world. And I think that, especially with like the current political landscape, at least on a macro level,
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. So, there may never be another point in history where all of the variables align like that, where you
Yeah.
can create those superstars from a technology perspective, but, also from a soft power perspective.
Yeah, basically culturally we're more scattered now. Even anime movies are doing amazing in the box office. I saw
Yeah.
Marlon
Okay.
Wayans, he had a movie come out and he was kind of like cussing out anime because he was like, these damn anime movies. Because I think he had a movie competing with like, I think
Really?
I remember the Demon Hunt. There was another anime movie, I got it wrong.
Okay.
But anyway, like he was competing with it and he was like, damn, like these guys are making money basically. And
Really?
yeah, I mean, listen, the world, just like in the economy, was very skewed towards a handful of countries, Western Europe and the US, and now the economy is global GDP is much more tilted towards Asia, which has the larger population, which
And
historically
Nollywood's
also
come
Nollywood's
through.
there, Nollywood's still there. But I mean, listen, in general, when I talk about GDP, Africa is still doing its thing. It's growing
Huh.
slowly. I mean, it's
Yeah.
growing, but obviously like at a more slower pace compared to like historically like China and Taiwan and Hong Kong and all these other places. So yeah, I just think you're right. We're in a new world where things are more scattered, and that's a good thing. I think that I want to see art from all over the world. I don't necessarily want to see it from one country and one narrative and one voice.
Will
One
there
thing
ever
actually, I
be
was
an
gone.
AI star as big as a human star?
I think eventually,
Because I
probably.
told you
Sad to
how
say.
I would ask Spotify to make playlists for me, right? It would be something like, I don't know, disco inspired, whatever,
Right.
R&B or pop songs or something. And then it would start like adding to it like artists who, when I researched them, were AI generated artists. And I couldn't work out
Wow.
what record label they were signed to. I couldn't work out if they were independent releases. I did a bit more digging. I think that they are Spotify owned content that it's putting into the playlist to avoid having to pay out the, not even peanuts, peanut dust that it
Yeah.
actually pays to real artists. And I was like, wow, Spotify, really? You're going to give me AI generated content that you own instead of actual disco music from like real humans that's good
Mm.
and
Yeah.
popular? Like trying to throw in some sound alikey kind of songs. I was like, I don't want this. I don't want this. Yeah. Dark.
And I think Timbaland has got an AI artist that he's
Oh,
pushing
yeah.
hard. There's the platform Sunu. Sunu, I think that
Timbe
Timbaland is.
Island.
Yeah, he's like involved in that. That's an AI. Am I saying it wrong? Timbaland.
The name
Okay,
of
whatever.
Timbe Island. Okay, never mind.
Okay, sorry. It's word of my head. Anyways, so maybe at home you laughed, guys. I don't know. But anyways, yeah. So Sunu is the AI music startup that he's involved in. I think he's invested in or he's partnered with. Listen, I have hope that people will rebel against this. I would like to believe that people are still more in tune with what humans create than what AI could create. But like, yeah, it could
But
potentially be
like
because you wouldn't necessarily know.
for the music industry to survive, like people really need to stop streaming. That's the only way for the music industry to survive. Because no one's made money since they stopped selling CDs and like
Yeah,
physical stuff. And like, oh, I know people are like, I have a record player, I have a cassette player, I have a Discman. Not enough of you. Not like indie hipster cute stuff. Like I'm talking like you need mass market moms buying CDs for the school run, grannies buying CDs to put in Christmas stockings. Like until we go back to that world, musicians aren't going to make money the way they used to. And they're going to have to tour until they're wheeled out in like a friggin' goodness knows what stretcher on their deathbed. And then hopefully still then break even because touring's so expensive. But musicians are not going to make money the way they used to. And
the
record
what
labels, meanwhile, are still finding ways to make money.
Yeah, so the labels actually, I think their revenue has now recovered from the pre-Napster era. So obviously, that's a long time. It's almost 20 years.
Mm,
But obviously, that money is not trickling down to the artist. The other thing that's very conniving is that the labels own a percentage in Spotify. So when Spotify launched in the
mm.
US to get the licensing agreements, they gave equity to the labels. So the labels have eaten very, very well from Spotify's rise because Spotify is now a public company, valuation strong, relatively speaking. So but you as an artist, you don't get that equity. And Jay-Z was trying that with Tidal, where it was like, we're gonna give
How's
equity, but
Tidal
obviously
doing?
Tidal got acquired by Block, didn't they? AKA Square.
Oh, yeah.
And but there was a few artists that had equity that complained that, it never really materialized for them. So I think Nicki Minaj has
I'm
been
back to
quite.
buying albums, yo. Seriously. I'm not
Yeah,
streaming
shout out to that.
anymore. I'm not paying for streaming because all of these amazing artists that I know are always talking about the struggles of making the art, or like you hear about everyone stopping, clubs are dying, all this kind of stuff. Capitalism, like you got to put money where your mouth is. If you care about something, you got to direct money towards it. And like I care about the artist, not the distribution channel.
Yeah, speaking of capitalism, we're gonna go to our Patreon story. We're gonna talk about Zohran Mamdani, the winner of the New York mayoral election. If you want to
Let's
hear
go.
our thoughts and insights on that, sub to our Patreon for as little as $5 a month. If not,
Bargain.
we'll catch you next week. Peace. All right, cool. So my man Zohran, he won
Zohran.
quite comfortably. I think he got over 1 million votes in the mayoral election, which is quite high compared to historical results.
Yeah.
But obviously the most notable thing about him is that he's a self-declared democratic socialist. To watch the full episode, subscribe at patreon.com/techish. You'll get access to all full-length episodes, no adverts, the chance to submit your questions into the show, and early bird discounted tickets to our live shows. Subscribe for as little as $5 a month.